My name is Charlie Haynes. I work as a park ranger at Olympic National Park in Washington. It's not an easy job, but I've always loved the peace of the mountains, the smell of the forest after rain, and being away from the crowds. At least, that's how I thought it was before last October. I still wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, remembering the details of that shift. It was a cold, damp Thursday morning like any other. We got a call over the radio. A research team hired by some private company had gone missing. They'd set up camp in the west part of the park for geological and biological studies, but hadn't checked in for 2 days. Probably radio problems, I thought, though a nagging feeling of concern crept in. Communication equipment doesn't fail like that, especially with professionals. My colleague Jim and I got ready to check it out. He drove the Jeep while I went over the details on my tablet. The team had 5 members, including 2 geologists, a biologist, a drone technician, and the leader, Dr. William Firth, who had led expeditions to places as remote as Alaska and the Sahara. When we reached the marked location, everything looked normal from a distance. But it didn't take long for us to realize something was off. The camp was empty, but not abandoned. Tents were torn, equipment scattered, and there was a black, viscous substance covering part of the ground. It wasn't oil, at least not the usual kind. It had a strange shine in the sunlight and looked almost alive, as if it was moving slowly. Some kind of fungus? Jim asked, crouching beside me. No idea. But this shouldn't be here. We tried calling the team over the radio, but all we got was static. We decided to follow the trail. The tracks were mixed up and confusing. Some led toward the river, others disappeared into the brush. Then we found the first signs of a struggle, pieces of fabric tangled in branches and deep gouges in the ground, like something heavy had been dragged. Things started getting more real and more terrifying when we found the first body. It was the drone technician lying face down, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a scream. There was no blood, but his skin was covered in the same black substance from the camp. Don't touch it, I warned Jim, who was inches from reaching it. That could be toxic. We called for backup, but they said it would be hours before a rescue team could arrive. We were on our own. The trail led to a cave entrance I'd never seen before. It wasn't on the maps, which was strange. Jim hesitated, but I knew we had to keep going. We grabbed our flashlights and went in. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with a metallic smell. The ground was covered with the same black substance, but now it was pulsing, almost like it had a rhythm of its own. Then we heard it a low, steady hum, mixed with a distant moan. We found 2 more bodies, both covered in the substance. One of them was holding a broken lantern. The other had deep, chemical burn-like marks on their face. This isn't natural, Jim whispered. Charlie, this is some kind of experiment. The cave widened into a large chamber, and that's when we found it. It was a metallic cylinder, partially buried in the ground. It looked like it had fallen there a long time ago, maybe decades. Around it, small devices blinked intermittently, and there were fresh puncture marks as if someone had tried to open it. That's when the noise started to get louder. Jim pointed the flashlight at one of the walls, and we saw the impossible. Creatures, or what was left of them. They looked human, but their bodies were covered in the black substance. They moved slowly, almost like they were being controlled, their vacant eyes fixed on us. Run, I shouted. Jim and I ran like we'd never run before, those things chasing us. The sounds were horrific, something between a scream and a snap. We managed to get out of the cave and barricade the entrance with logs and rocks. Backup arrived hours later. We tried to explain, but the chief just gave us a skeptical look and sent the rescue team to investigate. The 2 of us were sent back to base. 2 days later, the whole area was shut down. There was no official explanation. Jim asked for a transfer shortly after. I stayed, but nothing was ever the same. Sometimes I see men in black suits around the park, always avoiding questions. And at night, I still hear that hum in my nightmares. If you come to Olympic National Park, stay on the trails. Don't touch anything strange. And for God's sake, never go into unknown caves. My name is Ethan Hale. I've been working as a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park for over 15 years. In all that time, I've dealt with everything: reckless tourists, wild animals, unexpected storms. But nothing prepared me for what happened in September 2019. At first, it was just another regular morning. The radio in my Jeep crackled, and Miranda's voice came through, muffled. "Ethan, we've had reports of strange lights and noises in Sector 9, near the Wolf Valley Trail. Can you take a look?" Sector 9. That area was isolated and rarely visited. The rugged terrain and frequent landslides made it far from a tourist destination. I took the task without question, thinking maybe it was just a group of careless campers messing around with drones. When I got there, things started to feel off. First, the birds, or rather, the lack of them. The forest was silent. No chirping, no sound of squirrels. Nothing. Just the biting wind through the trees. Then, the smell. It was metallic, but not like blood, more like the scent you get when you spend too much time near burnt cables or overheated electronics. While I was exploring, I came across an abandoned camp. 2 tents, an extinguished campfire, and backpacks left open, with clothes and belongings scattered around the ground. It looked like the owners had left in a hurry. But what really unsettled me was the mark on the grass. A large burned circle about 10 meters in diameter. The vegetation was singed, and the soil underneath was compacted, as if something very heavy had landed there. I went to the radio to call Miranda, but all I got was static. The signal seemed blocked. I decided to go back the way I came, but after about 15 minutes of walking, I realized something was wrong. The GPS on my watch was spinning, like it was going in circles. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a shadow between the trees. Tall, maybe 2 meters, with movements that seemed mechanical. I thought it was some kind of equipment or animal, but when it stepped out of the shadows, my legs almost gave out. It was metallic. The joints were connected by thin cylinders and tubing that let out a soft hiss with every movement. It wasn't human, but it wasn't just a machine either. It had something organic. There were pieces of flesh on its metal arms, as if it had been covered by human remains. I froze, trying to convince myself it was some kind of military or research equipment. Then I heard the sound of a sharp crack, followed by something that sounded like teeth grinding. The thing turned toward me. I don't know if it was instinct or pure terror, but I ran. I ran like I never had before. Behind me, I heard footsteps heavy fast. It was hunting me. I hid under a rock overhang, holding my breath as the noise got closer. Through a gap in the bushes, I saw its hands. They weren't hands, but thin claws, like metal pincers, covered in dried blood. It stopped, as if sniffing the air for me, then continued. I waited for hours before I had the courage to move. When I finally made it back to the control station, I told Miranda and our boss everything, but the response was cold. The next day, 2 men in suits showed up. Government agents, they said. They told us not to talk about the incident and took all the reports. Sector 9 was closed indefinitely for maintenance, and since that day, any mention of it is quickly silenced. I continue my job, but I'm not the same. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear the dry crack and the grinding metal. I don't know what that thing was, but I'm sure it wasn't an isolated incident. Something is happening in our forests, and the government is making sure no one finds out. My name is Ethan Hayes. I've been a park ranger for over a decade, and the Stillwater National Preserve is my home. Surrounded by dense pine forests and a crystal-clear lake, it's a peaceful haven for tourists and anyone looking to escape the chaos of city life. But, like most remote places, it has its darker side. Most of the time, my job involves dealing with clueless campers, the occasional wildfire, and a curious bear here and there. Nothing that training and common sense can't handle. But last spring, everything changed. A call that seemed routine took me to one of the most isolated corners of the preserve. And what I found there? Well, let's just say I still wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing echoes of voices that should never have existed. It was a regular late afternoon when my Jeep radio crackled to life. A woman reported hearing screams coming from a restricted area near Blackwater Gorge. Tourists always ignored the signs, but this spot was different. Blackwater was dangerous, full of cliffs, and completely out of cell service range. At the meeting point, I found the caller a biology teacher out hiking with her students. She was visibly shaken. It wasn't just screams, she insisted, pointing toward the gorge. It sounded like someone was being dissected. I left her with the students and moved ahead. By the time I reached the edge of the gorge, the sound was gone, but something felt off. The ground was covered in human footprints mixed with something else. Tracks that didn't belong to any animal I knew. Then I saw it, something glinting in the distance. A small drone caught in a tree branch, its lights blinking erratically. The drone had a logo I recognized from the news Biosoma Technologies, a company claiming to develop advanced prosthetics. But what was an experimental drone doing in a national preserve? I decided to investigate further and brought the device back to the main cabin. Plugging it into one of our monitors, I froze at what appeared on the screen. The drone's footage showed experiments happening deep in the forest. Humans, or what was left of them, were trapped in machine-like exoskeletons. The sound the teacher had heard was screaming, mixed with the metallic grind of blades slicing through flesh. The most chilling part, the experiments seemed to be escaping. Something or someone was rebelling. In the hours that followed, I got reports from other rangers about strange encounters, people moving awkwardly, their bodies covered in cuts, eyes vacant. One had attacked a camper, leaving deep gashes and a black, tar-like substance oozing from the wound. When I returned to Blackwater Gorge, I found evidence of something even more horrifying, an underground lab. Rusted metal stairs led to a hidden facility beneath the forest. Inside, the hallways were deserted, but the bloodstains on the floor and scratches on the walls told a different story. More than that, I knew I wasn't alone. What I found in there wasn't just terrifying, it was inhuman. Biosoma had been using the preserve as a testing ground for neurological implants. Vulnerable people, possibly homeless individuals or undocumented immigrants, were being abducted and turned into combat machines. But something had gone wrong. The implants were failing, and the test subjects had escaped. Adrenaline pumping, I barely noticed the growing silence. Then, I heard it, the mechanical sound of footsteps echoing through the corridors. A metallic voice, almost robotic, but with a human edge, said, "Please, help us." As I tried to get out of the facility, one of the test subjects appeared half human, half machine, moving with impossible speed. Acting on instinct, I fired my gun. It wasn't enough. The creature only went down when I shoved it into a generator, electrocuting it. Before it collapsed, it muttered something that still haunts me. They made us. But we're not monsters. Authorities arrived too late. The lab was wiped out, burned, and buried by Biosoma itself, which denied any knowledge of the facility. But I know what I saw. Since that day, every time I hear footsteps in the woods, I wonder if something is still out there, waiting to be discovered.